Hi guys, and welcome to Second Perspective. This is another episode of QQ. I'm Paul Weston, and beside me is Noah Cohen.
Hello.
And today we're going to be doing a discussion, and that means tons of spoilers, of Whiplash. It's a film that just recently got nominated for an Oscar, didn't win. It did win Best Supporting Actor, however, and it was a fantastic film. If you're looking for something that is non-spoilers, go see our review. We talk about sort of strengths, weaknesses, why you should go see it, because you should go see it. We'll go right to it then.
Do you ever do anything on this show that you shouldn't go see?
Well, we did see Kingsman just recently. Actually, it was the last one we just did, and we're like, go see it on like a cheap Tuesday or something, or whatever. The majority of films I think we've watched have been pretty good. Princess Kaguya. Anyways, we're getting sidetracked, but
right.
Yeah, most people loved that Studio Ghibli film, but the three people me and the two other people that I did that review with just did not like it at all, so that was, I think, the only one.
Steer away from this film,
Yeah.
but listen to us talk about it.
But yeah, other than that, we'll get straight to it. In the review, we're going into the discussion, so leave if you haven't seen it. So in the review, you gave it an A, I gave it an A. Some of the strengths we get was like really good writing, good acting, everything you would expect from a decent film. The synopsis is basically Andrew, a really talented musician, basically a drummer, aspires to be the very best drummer in the world, or jazz drummer, and meets Fletcher, the scariest instructor ever, and they sort of collide, and all sorts of, as Noah likes to say, terrifying things happen. But yeah, why don't we get just straight to the beginning?
Cool.
It's in black. They do the... And then it cuts right to Andrew, the character, sitting. And actually, to be honest, I expected a close-up of his face or of the drum or something. And so it was sort of kind of neat for me when I saw just a wide shot of the protagonist. And it does a really smart thing with the dolly. At first, think, oh, it's just a little bit stylish, but you very quickly realize it's actually Fletcher. And it's a very interesting sort of moment, but we very quickly, both you and I, we watched, there's actually the first 10 minutes of the film on IMDb, which is kind of cool. And we rewatched it, and we both paused and looked at each other on a very particular line. When Fletcher says, "Did I ask you to start playing again?"
Mm-hmm.
And this is after he just said, "Did I ask you to stop?"
Mm-hmm.
Or why did you stop if you knew I was looking for players? Sorry. And we just both felt that felt so odd and so out of place. For me, it just seemed odd when he just made... You learn very quickly that Fletcher is all about status and like power control and all these different things, and he has no qualms about manipulating people in order to push them to their very limits. Even if they break, then fuck them, you don't need them. But it just seemed odd that he would do sort of two power plays right back to back, and it just felt kind of odd. What was your first reaction?
I agree with you in that they are two harsh power plays, one after another, but it's also, I think it's a bit of an introduction into the... Fletcher is letting... what's his name? Andrew.
Or Miles Teller, which is the actor.
Fletcher's character is letting Andrew know from the top the sort of things that he's going to be demanded of, and the way that he works. And that, like, yeah, I told you to start again, but you did it wrong. You did it like a fucking monkey playing cymbals. So let's try it again.
I don't have a good explanation for it, but you and I both thought the line that was coming, and I probably should have come, is like, "Did I ask you to stop?"
Stop. Yeah, should be the other.
You just saying what you did, because his very next line is, I asked you, why did you stop, and he started again, and then, you turn into a wind-up monkey. Maybe what you just said is the right thing, where it's like, I gave you the opportunity to play for me, and you played like a monkey. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
So maybe that line isn't as sort of jarring as maybe it's just a little more jarring to me. But it just seems so odd that it would be that instead of him.
Well, and you can kind of see it in Miles' reaction as well. He's kind of like he's confused. He switches his drumsticks from hand to hand. He's like, "Oh, what do I do? This is such a pressure moment," and we are kind of brought into his moment then, and like, what did he say? He told me to start, but he told me I did it wrong, and like, I'm trying to impress this guy, and just like, now we're already in the first scene, and here comes the like anxiety and confusion this kid is going through,
which goes through the entire film.
Yeah.
Right. Noah and I were just talking about how like this film becomes a total pressure cooker, but we'll be able to talk about that stuff in a immense amount. But why don't we? The very next scene goes into Andrew seeing a movie with his father, which right before it introduces sort of his love interest, and this is actually the biggest issue, aside for perhaps the car accident and the sort of the climax of the second act. For me, anyways, it was just stupid. But we'll get to that point. For me, the love interest stories just seemed very poorly executed, to be honest. Or not in comparison to everything else. It just what seemed bizarre is that it just didn't have. If you're going to do a love story, actually give it the time of day and like give it an actual scene where you actually sort of see the love that they have. Because I think I only remember really 3 scenes where it's like he finally has the courage to ask her out, and then he goes on that one date where they have a little bit of like the whole social network awkwardness where it's like, oops, about your school. And then that did not leave me with the whole, they're totally in love, or like, there's something could happen here. And then the very next scene that we really see her with is, I'm dumping you because I have to drum more because you're going to stop me. It's just like, I'm supposed to care?
Right. I don't think you are. I think she is a mechanism for him. There is a love story, but it's not between those two. It's between Fletcher and Andrew. That's the love story we need. And the love story between him and the girl is merely a mechanism for Andrew's character to drum. It's a social
responsibility
that we're like, oh, he's going to take this on. How is he going to double being a drummer and a lover? And he's not going to do that.
Well, and I guess that's sort of my point. It's just like...
But if we concentrated on the love story, like, I don't care about that. I just care about...
But you don't even need...
If he's even going to want her or not.
But yeah, and I guess that's sort of what my issue is with the sort of B stories. Either don't do it. Like, if you are truly committed to, like, the love story between him and... Andrew and Fletcher, then do that. There's no point, because I don't care about the girl, and... her performance is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with her, but it's just the story structure. I don't care about her, and every time she comes up on screen, there's far fewer stakes, and I'm far less interested in what's going to happen next with them. That it's dragging the momentum away from the film, which does so well for the majority of the film, with the momentum and anxiety and the pressure cooking and all that sort of stuff. You either commit to it. You don't need much. Just another scene or two where I begin to actually care about what happens to these two people, or just cut it from the film. Just don't do it, right? And so I think, Nick, I'm going right to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, all these things are bad about the film, but this is the only real thing that I'm a little more about the film, but just when everything else is so polished in the film, why would you?
It is polished, man. You get the first date, and then you get the breakup. We don't need the meat in between.
For me, it seems it just doesn't. I can see what you're saying, but in order for that to happen, for me, for that scene where he's gonna dump her, I need to care.
Yeah.
And I didn't.
You don't care about her.
Well, I don't care about him either. I think I do care about him, but I don't care about that part of his life. Yeah. And I think he's been a bit of a dick. I care less about him now. Or I don't necessarily care less about him, but I become far less sympathetic to him after that scene. So for me, and I don't think I'm the only one, where that does not do any positives for the story. It takes time away from the interesting parts, and in the end, I just don't. I mean, I sort of go like, wow, he really, he's dropping everything for this drumming thing, but you could have done that in so many other ways, and so many other, different moments, all sort of stuff, and it's just, when everything else, and like, so many other scenes are like 9s or 10s, when you have like a 6.5, maybe, it just shows so much.
It's a very mature move by him, though, in a way. Like, sure, he's being an asshole, but he's going basically like, I'm going to put this straight out for you. I can't do this relationship because I need to drum.
Yeah.
And not lying. He's not jumping around corners. He's just putting it out there on the table.
Yeah. I also, and the last
kind of for me, like, I do kind of, I sympathize with that a little bit. Like, oh, the poor
yeah,
guy,
but you wouldn't be a dick about it, right? You'd be like, and that's like, we won't linger for too long
about it though, so she can leave, so she'll hate him and leave him.
Oh man, I see that. I just don't believe. I don't.
But it's not even a love story. That's the thing, and that's why we don't get deep into it. But
I don't know. Like, the last thing I'll say about it before we'll move on, because this is clearly just, as we're saying, a very minor part of the film. It just.
You can't always have last word, Paul.
Okay, fine. You can have last word after this one, but it's just like Okay, if you want to have that scene, and you obviously he needs to break up with the girl if you do have the scene, or the storyline. Andrew's lines, he's just such a huge dick about it, and I mean, maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's what the director is trying to do, because like we'll talk about the ending, but like I don't think the ending's all sunshine and roses where all of a sudden, like, all of Andrew's problems are solved. Like, he might be going into, it might really be what seems like very nice moments, but ultimately a very tragic ending. Mm-hmm. We'll get to that, but do you have any last moments about being wrong about that storyline before we move on?
I think that this moment between the character's name is Nicole, and Andrew, does work, and it does fit for me, because it's not as much of a side B love story that we're to care about. It's actually to show us the lengths to which Andrew is going and starting to go. That's why it happens kind of early in the film. It's because we're trying to see he is falling deep into this pit of like
passion
that we all have within us, and so that's what I loved seeing about this movie, is watching how far he'll go and just these little ticks that keep happening, and Nicole's character is just one of the ticks along this time bomb.
Yeah, it's why don't we move along?
Yeah.
You can decide whether you guys think the B story was executed or not, which it wasn't. Just kidding. So we go along. Why don't we go into the scene so you do know the difference? As we see, Fletcher tells him about how he's basically going to find out. He's going to find his next drummer by doing the double time. So Andrew takes all his time to do it. He gets into studio band. It's all sunshine and roses. And what's really interesting is this really neat scene where, for the most part, so far, you've only seen Fletcher kind of flex his sort of intimidation muscle. And he calls him a squeaker, and he goes,
squeaker!
Yeah.
I love that.
And he goes, okay, we're going to take 10, and then the squeaker's on. And then, I could physically feel the other people in the theater being like, like, oh God, he just kicked somebody out, Metz, and being like, he wasn't actually out of tune, but because he couldn't tell, fuck him, and all that sort of stuff. So you're like, holy shit, this guy's not joking around. He will cut people at an instant, and then they throw Andrew on, which is, I think, a brilliant way of doing it, because the entire film, I'm so anxious, and then all of a sudden Fletcher comes and talks to him.
Yeah,
and
that
it's
10-minute break.
Yeah,
during that 10-minute break,
he's
very interesting.
He's kind. He goes, just relax. You got it.
Yeah.
He tells him the story about Joe Jones and assemble. And you're
kind
of
of
like,
I quite liked is how he asked him, "What do your parents do?" Because he wants him to be the kid who didn't have... If he had musicians... I think if he had if parents who were musicians, he would have dropped him. He would have burnt him into the ground. But the fact that he doesn't have parents that are musicians, then he's going to be this, like, fresh meat that J.K. Simmons' character molded entirely.
Well, and
that's what he asks him first right off. What do your parents do? What's going to be your story that I am a part of?
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. And, like, Fletcher's not just this asshole. Is just not just doing this because he likes to destroy people for fun. Like, ultimately, why he's doing all this, and you find in a later scene, is because he wants to find his protege, like the musician, right? And then he can be part of that story. And I imagine it's partly because maybe Fletcher just didn't have that skill himself, and so he had to, but he realized that he does have a particular skill in unlocking potential in people or just, like, destroying them. But yeah, and I thought it was a very interesting element. I wish there was a little bit more of it throughout the film, but kind of maybe...
more insight into Fletcher's character?
Not necessarily insight into Fletcher's character, sorry, but just... After this moment of sort of tenderness and kindness, it's just varying levels of sort of intimidation on Fletcher's level. But just sort of quickly cycling through my brain, I don't see right away like where it would sort of make sense in sort of Fletcher's character to be a little more gentle.
Well, what about the scene with the kid who died, quote, in the car accident?
Yeah, and like that's the only other moment where he's kind. He actually shows some sort of
that's
emotion.
A mask, huh? You think that's a mask?
Well, we find out that he doesn't tell people why he died.
No.
Or I think it's been just a little while since I've seen it, and I don't quite remember.
So
does he say how he dies, or does he just say?
He says, this kid got in a car accident and died.
So
and
he
then
totally
later,
lied.
we hear that the lawyer said that the kid hung himself. So I'm guessing Fletcher's like, gets the call. Oh, this kid hung himself. Great. Hangs up phone.
Yeah.
This is my opportunity. Put in my fake tears and say that he died in a car accident, which is a great foreshadowing to later.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was purposeful. J.K. Simmons is like, he's always thinking about what I can do for this this boy to make him really... I don't know. What is the purpose of that scene for?
The car accident?
Yeah.
Or the 10 minute?
The playing the CD... Oh, yeah, I see what it is, actually. Playing the CD of the kid who just died. Why is Fletcher showing his showing the class that he's crying?
Well, I think it's that weird thing, and like I guess what's weird is about this, like, this film takes place in like the same room for probably 60-70% of it, and so that's why we can kind of sort of talk about all these scenes sort of all in one and sort of like flounder around in it a little bit. And for me, it seems that, well, quite clearly he's trying to manipulate people, but it's often like really in a very basic sense, it's like that cool kid that always like bullies everybody, but then is suddenly nice to you. Like, you know that person is a total jerk, but for whatever reason it feels really good when that person is nice to you. And for whatever reason in human nature we kind of just eat that up. And I think it's just, and that's sort of what I meant by, like, you know, seeing more of that. So in this sort of 10-minute break when he's kind to Andrew for that moment before the brilliant are you rushing or are you dragging, and then, you know, the whole crying scene, I just maybe one extra scene where it's not just like, I will fuck you like a pig, like it's brilliant crazy stuff, but it was just sort of like pounding the same sort of technique over and over and over again, and I just thought there could have been a little bit like, if we were using like colors or something, it's like it was just dumping red when, you know, having a spot of blue in there every once in a while was, I think, even made sort of the red a little more poignant, right?
How about that? All right, I'm keep trying to find these spots of blue. What about the scene after the whole car accident ordeal, where they meet in the bar, in the jazz bar. That's a very Blue moment. Like, they've just had this terrible falling out, and all of a sudden we do see Fletcher again, and he's all cool. We're friends, you know. Why don't you come play for me? And then he screws him over. He totally screws him over. He gives him the wrong music, gives him the wrong song. So it's still all part of the plan.
Yeah.
But he, within that massive red, he'll do these little dips to keep fishing in Andrew's character.
Yeah, but I mean, with that sort of bar scene, it's no longer, at least in my eyes, it's no longer about making him the best drummer it can be. It's that particular scene is just to actually destroy him as best he can, like, right? And then also when he realizes that, you know, by just trying to destroy him, Andrew actually sort of finds that, you know, it's like the phoenix within, like he finds his sort of resurrection and can persevere through it. Like, that was an accident on
you're right.
J.K. Simmons' part. That's not on purpose, and that's what I mean. Like, I wish there was sort of, you know, Blue tactics on his purpose, like with like kindness and whatever. But like, I'm nitpicking a little bit, but it's.
So you wanted to see him later. Not just through that first hallway and the like, oh, not quite my tempo. Because that's very Blue.
Yeah.
Very, but then after that point, once he throws that chair, it's all red.
Yeah, it's just, and containment our strange metaphor, or analogy or whatever. And yeah, it's, I mean, don't get me wrong, all those scenes are super interesting. Like, when he says, when he brings in another drummer, after you think, okay, Andrew's got it, he's finally making headway, he's practicing until his hands are bleeding, and like he legitimately has to put his hands into ice, just to cool them down so he can actually drum. And then he all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he brings in the studio band, the second band's core drummer, the person that Andrew passed to get in the studio drum in the first place. I should remember his name. I think it's Ryan, and like I thought that was a pretty clever tactic. So it's just the film does really good job of containing, not just having Fletcher just yell the whole time.
Yeah.
He does come up with different tactics. I think the more I sort of talk it through, the more I think it's just sort of a personal desire, a wish that was in the script and not necessarily needed. It's just there was a little more. Just to keep Andrew honest with it being nice, because
he's there, he's hooked him. He doesn't need to be on. He doesn't need to be nice.
Yeah,
he's hooked Andrew.
Yeah,
he's got his hand dipping right into that cold water, which is, side note, just on cinematography, an amazing shot.
Yes,
of like, it's sideways, so you're looking at the pitcher of ice as though it is tipped sideways. So you see from left to right this hand come across frame and just fill the whole frame with blood and fill the whole glass with blood. And you can get into the metaphors of like things turning, you know, red, as we say.
Yeah.
That's just some really cool shots.
Yeah, it's I do like that. I like how this film did a really good job of sort of bringing Andrew up just a little bit and just cutting him down. So like, you know, every time something good happened in drumming, he would like, you know, ask the girl out, or you know, he trained really hard and then he'd be a little bit better at drumming, but he would always, right before you're like, okay, he's in the clear, they would bring in the new drummer. Just
lose
crazy.
The book.
Yeah, he would lose the book. Although I thought that was actually a very clever sort of plot point, because normally you would think, oh crap, he lost a book.
He's
maybe
really screwed.
He's really screwed. He's gonna get kicked out of school or something, and yet it turns that sort of expectation right on its head, and being like, I can do it. I can go on stage and I know it by heart. And I thought that was really cleverly written. So it does that really well. But why don't we go to the car scene? Because I actually don't know how
Car crash?
Yeah, the car accident scene. I don't know necessarily how you feel about it. It's one of the things that, like, Pixar has this sheet out where it's like, something like 27 rules to storytelling, and one of the rules that they have that I thought was kind of interesting is that they say you're allowed to use coincidence to get your character into trouble, but you're not allowed to use it to get them out. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool, because one of the things that happens to Andrew while he's riding the bus is it just breaks down.
Yeah.
Right? And, if for whatever reason, like, I think this film would die if any of Andrew's problems were solved by chance. Ooh. As soon as I say that, he did lose the book and have that, but on the same token, Andrew earned it, right, by like drumming and all sort of stuff, right? So, and it's staying with the car scene at risk of us going all over the place again. The bus breaks down. He has to do this whole like almost like Hollywood-esque like chase around where like he's gotta, and I'm glad they didn't linger too long on that. Where like all he had to do was find a car.
Thank God they didn't linger, because that was stressful.
It was very stressful, and I think the reason it worked is because they didn't make it a 10-minute
ordeal. And then you're just like, okay.
So and I kind of like how he did leave the drumsticks there, and as soon as they had that shot of the bag and he left, I was like, well, fuck, he's gonna have to come back. And I didn't expect Andrew to have to drive back, because like most people would think, well, he just used somebody else's drumsticks.
Yeah.
But the brilliant thing they did, I think, is with Fletcher, because he has all these really crazy rules, and they know that he's a dick, they can legitimately believe that he would say, you're not allowed to drum without your own drumsticks.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so by doing that, he creates this, in this particular world. Story, with its own rules, and one of the rules is Fletcher will just do dickish things that make things more difficult for people. They can kind of recreate that, or they can create believable stakes. I did like where with Andrew he was given the opportunity of let somebody else take your spot, or find your own drumsticks and do it, and I did like that, but the car accident, I just. First, like purely logically, I don't know how someone could physically survive that and then like be able to run to a place and then continue drumming and all sort of stuff. But like ignoring physically, what about hit and runs, cops, all that sort of stuff, right? Like
let's focus here.
Yeah.
Not that you're not being focused.
Yeah.
But I think like. We can do that with anything.
Yeah.
With anything in any movie, find those little extra percolations that don't make it work.
Yeah.
But I think in its core, that car accident, the whole so Andrew's thing is to be special, to be that one that like everyone tells this in 20 years. Everyone's telling their story to their musical students. Like, did you know that Andrew Fletcher, on the way to perform at Carnegie Hall, was actually hit by a car? But he's still. Oh, sorry, I mixed them. There are two. Andrew was hit by a car and still did the thing. There, we are seeing that story reenact. We're seeing how the most drastic things that can happen that we hear. Those sorts of things are very common in our storytelling discourse today. We try and find these anomalies of human survival and tell them to people, almost giving them this sort of bar that you have to set. Even just that was actual blood on the drumsticks, or sort of this how much can people hurt themselves and then still
how much basically it doesn't even necessarily have to be hurt, but it's just an easy thing. It's just how much is someone going to sacrifice for their dream, essentially.
And we love hearing those big stories of sacrifice. And that's what's great about this movie is because this is his sacrifice.
And I think that, like, I don't know that this film is necessarily saying, you know, and then everything is great and everything was worth it, which is, I think, really interesting, and we'll talk about it near the end. But I just, with the car scene, getting hit, wasn't he hit by a semi?
Yeah, it looked like it.
That's just, like, it's just, for me, this film seems, for the most part, pretty believable. I've seen a car get hit by a semi before.
Yeah,
that person
from the driver's seat.
Yeah, like and that person died. Like it's not. So for me, maybe that particular like personal memory is just like not. It kind of jars me a little bit, but you get hit by a semi that hard.
Semi.
Yeah, it's
semi a Canadian thing.
Yeah,
semi truck.
You're American, but. The truck with the big thing. How about that?
You know, the movie is so good that you can go in and say it should have been a Nissan. Like, it shouldn't have been a semi.
But like,
you have to find these little small things to critique.
But I mean, well, for one, that's sort of why we're here. But two, I do think there are little things, and I'm not nitpicking, but I feel like this is sort of a legitimate issue because it jarred me so big.
Really?
Like, if you got hit by a car and he couldn't do the drumming thing, great, okay, I believe that, that's cool.
He couldn't.
Yeah, okay, I mean, he couldn't do it, like, actually, he couldn't get out of the car, he has to go into the ambulance, that sort of thing, right? But for him to get out of a car, go over, like, walk the 2 minutes, whatever, and then drum, it's just, for me, that was too far of a reach. And maybe you were right. Like maybe there's just a certain line. But I remember the person I saw the film with, Nathan, who usually is here but can't be today. I remember the first thing I said to him was like the car crash, and he goes, "Yeah, that may have been a little bit crazy for me." I'm sure he'll want to defend himself on that, so I won't drag him into it. But for me, it's just how can you look me in the face like you are right now and say, "Yeah, I can believe that in everyday life, someone can get hit dead on, T-bone, by a semi or a truck, a big truck, hard, and then get out of a car and then continue to do what he's doing. You can get a concussion, you can do all these sort of things. Like, people have gotten concussions from far less, and it's just... I
know you say why we're here, but like I don't care about that question.
Yeah,
that's one of those things that the story... for me, took me in such a way. If you're paying attention to the color of the wallpaper, then something is wrong. And
yes.
I think
I've said that to you.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was me.
If you're paying attention to, you have said that to me. Yeah. It wasn't the wallpaper, but because I just made that up.
But anyway,
copyright, Paul Weston. Are you happy? No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, if it does take you out, then it's totally legitimate. But it's just hard for me to...
Well, but the thing is like, I don't think I'm talking about wallpaper. I'm thinking, like, I think this is a legitimate...
It's a whole plot point.
It's a whole plot point.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with him getting to an accident or something of the like, but find something that's, like, doable. Like, he bumps it, like, he swerves and he hits a tree. Yeah. Or just something, but, like...
Why a semi-truck?
Yeah, it's just like, you pick the biggest fucking thing you can get hit by, and it's just like, the film does such it pays so much attention to being realistic, and then also it has that moment where it's just not...
I feel like it'd be a letdown, though, if he hit a tree, because you kind of know this whole time, with the J.K. Fletcher thing earlier, with the foreshadowing of he got
just
in the car.
blending names.
Yeah, names are going to not make any sense here, guys. So, but the main two people are Andrew and
Fletcher.
Yeah. Fletcher's foreshadowing earlier to getting hit by a car. When he gets in that car with those drumsticks, when Andrew gets in that car,
that's
you're
true.
Like, he's going to get hit. It is in the back of your mind. And there's this shot where your profile on Andrew as he's driving, and you're like, okay, this is a shot. Oh, it's holding for too long. Something's coming. Something's coming. And then and it like, not only is it tense that you think he's going to get hit by a car, you want to make it to this concert. So just the semi like pushes me. That's the moment you do jump out of your seat a little bit, and you get like, if it was a fucking Nissan or a tree, you'd be like, okay, oh, just get to the concert, like. But this is like this is a cracker for me. That's what I really. Oh yeah, semi Nissan tree.
Fair enough. I'm glad that we're disagreeing on certain things, because it's boring if everyone just agrees on something. So why don't we? I was actually curious what you thought about the moment where Andrew body checks Fletcher. How was that satisfying enough for you, or was it like?
See, I don't even know if it was that memorable for me.
Yeah, like that's what was sort of a little bit sad for me, because the whole time watching the film, I just want Andrew to drop the drumsticks or like throw them like straight through his eyeball or something, like very like physical, visceral thing. And then when that happens,
I wanted to see a scar. Like I think Fletcher should be scarred somehow, either with a black eye or something.
Yeah.
Just enough to show us that he did leave a little bit of a physical mark on Fletcher's character.
Yeah.
Whereas because that finishes the scene, right? As he tackles him, they're down to the ground, scene ends.
Yeah. Which, by the way, J.K. Simmons actually apparently cracked 2 ribs in that scene, which I found kind of interesting. That we're talking and it didn't feel satisfying enough. But so, sorry, J.K.
But when you're retelling the story of these two and the legacy of soon-to-be Andrew, who will be the new, what's the name of the drummer who gets this shit thrown at his head?
Joe Jones?
Was it him? Yeah, Joe Jones. Okay, so when you're telling the story as you tell the story of Joe Jones about Andrew, you'll say, oh, and in this concert, he actually tackled Fletcher to the ground. I feel like you would include that in the story.
Yeah.
But it's not entirely... You're right, it's not that big of a payoff in the actual...
Which is kind of unfortunate, because like, I feel like if it was a bigger payoff, I think it would have really... Because like, I don't know that too many people were set... Like, I don't know how many people were... knew that Fletcher was setting him up. I mean, I thought something was a little bit weird. And I know that Nathan, the guy I saw it with, he like told me like right away. He's like, as soon as they were going to play together, he knew that Fletcher was just going to screw him over somehow. Yeah. And actually, it was the speech where he goes like, "This is your moment. Like, play well, and you can get signed with someone. But if you don't, you're fucked." And I was like, "Uh-oh, something bad's happening to somebody, right?"
Yeah.
Which has to be Andrew, right? But like, if the payoff of Andrew actually doing something to someone, to Fletcher, giving the black eye, have seen Fletcher really flustered or something, just a little bit more emotionally, I think my guard would have been down just a little bit more for the basically backstab that Fletcher does, right? I don't know. Do you agree with that, or am I just crazy?
So you want to see more of a emotional
payoff
from Fletcher? You want him to be
from Andrew physically attacking Fletcher, because I feel like it would have lowered my guard for the well constructed third act, and it would have made me, I think.
What would you like to see?
I don't know. I thought like the black eye might be a good idea.
Yeah, have him be
it may have just been like the shot types and stuff, because I remember it was a wide when he tackled him. There's like no close-ups.
It goes then into the lower angle, looking up at them as they kind of fall almost onto the camera.
Yeah, but there's like there's no close-ups when they're like actually struggling or anything. And I remember there's like a medium of Andrew when he's being dragged away. So to be honest, I'm not exactly sure, but I remember being like, I got what I wanted, but it just wasn't. It's like eating that chocolate bar that you've wanted for like the last 7 days and eating it and just being not quite like, it's not quite as
the movie could have ended there if your chocolate bar was done, but that's why it keeps going.
Yeah.
Because you're not fully satisfied that he tackled him to the ground. You want one more big punch.
Yeah.
And that's what that finale is.
Yeah. The more I talk about this film, more I just kind of question my sort of qualms with it. So, which is interesting. So, why don't we talk about the bar scene then?
The bar.
Yeah.
Ooh, that scene is so interesting because you go this whole time with Fletcher, seeing him as this sharp, angry, rough, bald, eccentric, just man who you're afraid is going to pierce a hole right through you. Mm-hmm. And then you come into this jazz bar, and there he is just on the piano. Mm-hmm. Just playing away all kind. Mm-hmm. This is the real Blue moment for us. Mm-hmm. And I felt to be in the place at that point of Andrew. Always sort of questioning this, like, he's questioning who this man really is, and can he like me? Does he hate me? What is this guy? And that scene brought me to ask that question.
Yeah, and I think that's why I was always asking about getting more quote unquote blue moments, is because I wanted to ask the question of, like, what is he really like on the inside? Yeah. Right? And when it was just always sort of repetitively, like, sort of angry or red or just, like, manipulative, I thought, is he just truly a bad person? Mm. And I knew the script is too well written to be like that, but I never questioned or never really dwelled in the idea of, like, sympathizing with him. Mm-hmm. Until, like, the very end, which maybe is the point, but, like, I would have liked just a little bits and moments of being like, yeah, he's a dick, but, like, somewhere deep down inside, like, he's doing this for an understandable reason. And, like, we get it in the bar scene. And I think that's partly why I kind of like it. I really enjoy the scene because you sort of realize, like, talking about character objectives, I'm not sure if that's a little too far gone for our audience, but, like, often with characters and that sort of thing, when actors play them, you tend to find, like, to keep it really simple, is to find, like, why are they doing everything that they're doing in the script? Mm-hmm. And theoretically, an actor should, or a writer and actor should be able to find, like, one overarching desire or goal or dream that influences every action that the character does. And we won't get too far into that, but, like, in this scene for Fletcher, we realize, like, his whole objective, his whole dream, need, desire, is to find the one, mm-hmm. his protege, the next Buddy Richie, or Rich,
It's interesting that he tells that to Andrew too, yeah. while they're sitting there. He divulges his objective.
Yeah, and it's
which often doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I think I like, Noah's worked with me before in that sort of, like, director-actor relationship. He knows that I don't always like it when, like, scripts just sort of, like, flat out, like, I always wanted you to love me. But I thought it worked in this particular movie because
you kind of knew it throughout, huh?
A little bit, yeah. And, like, for him to sort of, I guess maybe for the audience, the reason it's emotionally satisfying is because he admits it, and that it almost looks like he's admitting defeat. And, you realize that in the end, yeah, his methods are totally questionable, but in the end, he's exactly like Andrew in that he's trying to be the very best of what he is, or what he's trying to, be a conductor or whatever. I actually really like the scene of, like, anyone can be a fucking conductor, wave your hand, whatever. And I think it worked because, one, it gives us an emotional payoff of realizing, yes, okay, Fletcher's someone very, well, I'll use it very lightly in saying that, like, he is sympathizable. You can sympathize with his plight, or at least empathize with it. And but I think the more brilliant thing that it does with this particular moment is that it goes and it tries to even further sort of catch you off guard when Andrew goes on stage, and the very first line that he does as he passes the drums, Fletcher says, "Do you think I'm fucking stupid? I knew it was you." And all of a sudden, that like 10-15 minute span where you're kind of like don't have that anxious feeling that you've had on the entire film. You don't feel like the walls are kind of caving in, which by the way it was often done by really brilliant and sort of well crafted close ups. Which would like when it's a close up on Andrew's face, like a symbol would be covering half the screen. So like the director did a really good job of picking all these shots and close-ups and stuff that would make you feel really claustrophobic in a visual sense. So that feeling that you've had for the last 10-15 minutes, or we didn't have that feeling for the last 10-15 minutes. And also, as soon as he says that line, I think one of the very next shots is a similar close-up that we've been sort of repeatedly thrown. Also, we get a huge rush of that anxiety again. And then you're like, this film is not over. The battle is not done. There's no sort of mutual understanding. This is just another sort of play dead thing by Fletcher. And that's why I really enjoyed Fletcher sort of seemingly throwing up all his cards at the bar scene. And so that's my long roundabout way of saying that I did enjoy him saying, basically divulging his objective.
Mm-hmm. Which was, in fact, a tactic for his objective.
Exactly. Well,
because he's saying that to Fletcher, to Andrew, to get Andrew to sympathize with Fletcher and see that, he is at a lower moment. I sympathize with this dude. Sure, I'll play with him.
But see, I don't know.
But that wasn't what made him play. It was the girl that he calls the girl. She's not gonna go.
I think he just plays because he hadn't been playing for a long time. He passed like one of those street drummers, and I think it's just meeting Fletcher, being at the jazz bar, and just realizing how far gone they have. How far they've fallen, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I think for about that 5 or 10 minutes when they have the bar scene and he's revealing, this is why I did what I did. I don't believe if you and I believe that his ultimate goal was to find a protege, I don't think that he's telling Andrew that. I just wanted to. I think after he's been kicked out of Schaefer, his temporary goal is just to destroy Andrew the biggest way possible, which is, as I said earlier, very clearly and cleverly sort of shown by that speech that he says, you could be picked up by, all these, I don't know the important bands, so all these important people or these important bands or whatever, but if you screw up, they might not want you ever. And just to kind of briefly go into sort of a grander scope of not just this film but films in general, about stakes, because this is why we do the podcast, so we can learn about this shit. I think one of the things that this film did better than most films is that it preemptively laid sort of plot points and sort of facts or rules of the world, so that when it shows up that Andrew's on stage and he doesn't have the sheet music, people understand the level and just how important this is, that he doesn't, that he's going to get screwed, right? It set it up all before. It didn't give us the moment and then try to stack on the stakes. Because of really strong writing, it built the moment, or it built the stakes before it happened. Yeah. So, and that's why I think a lot of films sort of struggle with, and just writing in general. That's what's really hard, is finding moments that are entertaining, move the plot forward, and build stakes. Right, and that's why we say that this is a well-written story, is because it does all those things, without just absolutely, just like, oh no, like where it has like this like neon lights about it, like, hey, we're trying, like, this line's really important. You know, something really important is gonna happen, and you know, if they don't, then the whole world explodes. Like, it's not. It doesn't have it built its stakes subtly. Yet when it happens, you realize the significance of those moments.
I see.
Right. So that's I think what makes a good script versus a poor script, because it's always easy to be like, yeah, it's well written. Well, maybe you just resonate with the particular moments.
The sheet music's a great example of that, because we're not all familiar with how much Neiman needs his sheet music, or any drummer needs sheet music. And this film sets that up perfectly.
Exactly. Even
without us knowing that it's going to come back later.
Exactly. And then, because, like, even that moment when the person says, like, I need the sheet music, I've lost it, that sort of thing.
That's such a sad... That moment's really funny for me, where he's like, you know I need those. I like, he is having some prescription for not being able to visually
like, he needs visual cues.
Stuff. Yeah. You know I need visual cues. That's so sad.
Like, like, you understand for that character, although that one's been kind of a dick the whole time.
Yeah.
But, so, why don't we... Let's talk about the ending.
This is what makes... This is what made this film, was the ending. I wanted it so badly the whole time. And I was so worried.
Wanted what?
I wanted the ending.
What ending?
You'll see.
Okay.
I wanted it so... I wanted this, like, huge payoff. This long, huge, kick-in-the-ass payoff that I hadn't seen in any film before. And I was afraid in watching this, the whole build-up to the whole film. I'm, like, fearing, how are they going to finish this? I know how I want them to finish it. Sort of. I don't know what it is, but like...
When you say you know how you want them to finish it, do you mean, like, actual plot point or, like, emotionally? Like
emotionally. There's, like, this feeling I need, and it's going to take a little while, maybe 6 minutes, but there's a feeling that I need, there's a brutality that I need here to wrap this up. And
well, like, that's, like, not to cut you off, but, like, that's what's really interesting and what sort of separates, you know, you and I often know emotionally what we need, but what makes really good writers is finding the actual physical moments, right? And that's why, like, good writing is always something to be so envious of, because it's always easy to, not easy, but it's, you know, to know emotionally what it needs.
Yeah.
So anyway, continue.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And as any audience member, you're building this emotional state of people. You need to be, like, as a good writer, you need to be fully aware of the emotional state of people. And this never really jumps in and out of that. It keeps you there, and then it builds it, and then it just kicks it right in the ass with that finale. I think that we were looking at the comments on IMDb, and people are like, "Oh, it's too long," and that's because you were probably watching this film while you were trying to cook dinner or something, or like you were talking on the phone, because it ratio-wise, if you're gonna, like, mathematically break down film and emotion when you're watching this thing, you need a 6-minute finale to the shit that we have waded through this whole time. You need Neiman to just, like, tear it up on those drums, and he does. And it's not, you know, there's no montage or anything of, like, Neiman's life paired with the strumming of his, you know, drums, and, like, it's literally only the performance that we're hearing. And I got in tune with the how do you say, I felt like I kind of became a drum expert during that finale. I got to really be able to appreciate, like, oh, he's pulling some serious moves here on that set. But I really, I think that whole part, the finale that I'm speaking of, is when he sits down and on that drum set, and they finish the set
that he doesn't know,
and he's still playing, and that's kind of when it starts, and that's when, as an audience, you're like, oh, okay, this is when it starts. This is it. This is the payoff. Here we go. Hold on to your seats and get ready for the biggest drum solo and it's so exciting. Your heart is just and like.
So, it might be a bit difficult. It might just be, well crafted filmmaking. But what about that? And like we are gonna try and break it down a little bit and see if we can. Like what about that 5-minute scenario? Which like what made it work versus like what if it was not correctly done, where it was just not payoff. Like what I keep saying the same thing, but essentially is what elements of filmmaking didn't make it work?
Yeah.
Because that could have easily have just not been emotionally satisfying. It could have been 6 minutes of someone drumming and being like, I'm kind of done. Like, so for you, being an inspiring filmmaker, like what made it work for you?
Like I said earlier, I think they could have done it. They could have done it as a montage. They could have done all sorts of crane shots, but as we mentioned earlier, and why this film deserves an A is because it's simple, and because you stick with the Andrew's winning move. This is all a game of chess, as is a lot of things. But Andrew's winning move, his final moment that we've been wanting to take. We've been wanting him to punch, J.K. Simmons, but we've been wanting him to do more as well. Sure, he tackles him, but we want, as an audience, we want this battle to be victorious, and that is why the victory. It's a simple victory, but it's it's always the most simple that works, and it totally applies in this situation. He, on the most basic level, defies what Fletcher wants. He is not doing what Fletcher has asked him to do. He is playing when Fletcher said, don't play. Defiance 1. Defiance 2 is, he then takes the step and says, I'll cue you. Which puts him, they've just switched shoes all of a sudden. He's now the conductor and the drummer. And Fletcher is just his puppet. So, we're seeing the dominance roles switch, which is always a very satisfying feeling. Only when... It's a satisfying feeling to see dominance roles switch only when we've been led throughout this entire film to want them to switch.
Yeah.
There's this tension between them, those two, and then when it breaks.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's like the entire film just sort of builds that tension of you're seeing this Andrew just pushing through this wall just nonstop, beating his head against it, and
be impressed, please, Fletcher. Just be impressed. Just but never.
And it would just have him be you are fantastic.
Yep.
And I mean it, right? Because I can see him being you are fantastic, just kidding.
Yeah.
But at the end, and it's just those last 2 shots where it's, where it's the eyes.
Yes.
Where it's just the eyes.
You don't see any mouth. You don't see anything. Just eyes.
Which is really funny because I always had a particular affinity for those shots earlier in my budding filmmaking career, but my cinematographer that I often work with, she always said it didn't work or it doesn't work. So I just found it interesting that the most powerful moment is a shot that she doesn't think works, when 99.9% of the time she's usually right. So one small victory for me.
Disclaimer: Sue's usually right.
Yes, but
the truth.
Yeah. It's I really like that. I thought you did a very good job breaking that down. The last thing I'll say about the ending, aside from the fact that it just sounds really nice.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say. It's just that would be my last thing. Is you're just wanting this explosive fireworks, and that's what you get. It's just loud, fast drums and no dialogue, and you mentioned, Paul, earlier, that part when he screams when
we watched the ending recently, and Noah was just about to say that. Okay, I can say it. That we realize that J.K. Simmons actually yells a little bit while he's like getting pumped up about watching Andrew play and all that stuff, and we can't. There's no audio of his yelling or anything. It's just the music, which I thought was a very nice sort of directorial touch, because you could easily had it the music, J.K. Simmons talking or whatever, but it's like, no, that's not important right now. What's important is the music, and so the music sort of takes precedence. The one thing I sort of wanted to touch on before we wrap up everything. Is what is the ending suggesting? What is the ending meaning? And I keep saying throughout this discussion is Andrew going to a better place? Is he is all sunshine and roses for him? And to be perfectly honest, I think it's weird, and I really like this about the ending, and I like these sort of weird tragic endings in a sense. It's that by winning this game that he's playing with Fletcher, I think ultimately in his life, I don't know that he thinks he loses, but I think he might have lost. Or at least he will live a very sort of tragic life. Like, he may actually become Charlie Parker, where by winning over Fletcher, he's going to go down this path of being drunk and broke and alone at 34 and dead, because that's what happens with Charlie Parker, right? And he keeps mentioning how like he would rather be dead at 34 and having people talk about him at a dinner table than being 90, rich and sober and have no one talk about him, right?
That was answered for me. That question of what's next, has he won or lost, and why is he doing this? Right before he goes on and plays that solo, when he goes out, hugs his dad, and walks back in. For me, that hugging of his father, even though no word, I don't think any words are spoken, was sort of this moment of like, thank you for everything you've done. Thank you for being my father. I understand now. I have been batshit crazy for these past 3 months. Let me just win this battle, and then we'll be okay.
Interesting. See,
I don't know why I got that, but it's just a hug with the father, because I think throughout the film, his interactions with the father are not real. Like, sure, he goes to the movies with him, and the father's trying to help the son. Be like, hey, remember what really matters. It's gonna be okay. Like mediocrity. But at 19, you're like, nah.
Fuck that.
Mediocrity. Right. But that hugging of his father was, to me, him accepting and understanding what his father has wanted for him this whole time.
See, I didn't get that. And in fact, I think I might have gotten something else, where it's just like with the hug, it's just he was beaten, and during the hug, I don't know if anything necessarily changed his mind, or we didn't see any visual cue, which usually I'm a sort of firm disbeliever in. Like, I feel like we need to see or hear something that changes the character's mind from I'm broken, I'm beaten, into I have an idea. Like, usually I believe that in filmmaking you need something to cue the character and the audience. Like, the audience doesn't need to see it right away, maybe like after or whatever, but like ultimately the audience needs to see what cued the character for that.
If he was broken and beaten, he wouldn't walk back. He wouldn't walk back on.
Yeah, well,
excuse me.
That's what I feel like, something changed his mind, right? Because anyway, so like we won't argue too much about a hug that we can't really sort of prove or anything, but just the way that he interacted with Fletcher during his sort of drum solo, it's weird. Like, I understand why Fletcher would be like, holy shit, he's broken through, he is what I'm looking for, and also because like throughout that drum solo, at first he's like, stop drumming and all that sort of things, and then by the end of it, you can see Fletcher's like, yes, please work with me, we got something together. I have, for a little while I struggled with like, why would Andrew need him but then you sort of realize, well, Andrew wouldn't have gotten there without him, but the relationship between him and Fletcher, like, the only way that they could get further and as a better drummer and make him a better musician was through basically self-destruction. And so in order for them to get to where they both want to go, there's no way that Andrew's going to get out of this alive, right? Like, emotionally and like really physically. There's just like eventually he will burn out, do drugs. Like he's just going to have to destroy himself in order to get to that goal. And at least that was my sort of impression. And like that's not what I got out
just
right
in
away.
the early stages though. That's sort of the mentality I got. His teaching mentality was in these early stages. I'm going to break you. That's what they do with the Navy and the Army, and they're going to break you. They are going to turn you into nothing, and then build you up. You're not going to turn into a meth, crack, dive, heroin at 40. Maybe.
Do you think Fletcher can actually teach someone and actually get them to the point? Because like they don't want to be pretty damn good. They want to be the best, right? And I feel like this film, the whole film is saying you want to be the best. You have to sacrifice everything, not just like the things that you are like, yeah, okay, I can sacrifice that. I can sacrifice a girlfriend. I can sacrifice my hands, whatever. No, you have to sacrifice fucking everything, including ultimately your life, right? Like physically. That's what right now what my sort of reaction is to that ending. And I'm not saying it's a bad ending. I say it's actually a quite interesting ending, and it sort of leaves the audience to be like. Instead of like, yeah, now they're all gonna be happy and be like this wonderful duo together, and he's gonna play on the piano as well. They're gonna have cups of tea, whatever. It sort of leaves like, this is what these two characters are willing to sacrifice and are going to sacrifice to become what they want to. Are you, the audience member? Are you willing to do that?
Yeah.
And at the end, I'm like, fuck. Like, would I sort of had that thought of like, would I be willing to just sacrifice that much to be, quote unquote, the best filmmaker in the world? And I was sort of like, I don't know, right? Like, because
the fact that you're questioning it though is perfect.
Yeah, and I think that's hopefully what the director wanted, right?
Yeah.
And then I've always had these conversations with myself, especially because I'm going into the arts and stuff. It's like, why am I doing this? And I realized for me personally, I'm doing it because it makes me happy, and ultimately I want to do work that challenges me, makes me think, and also like live a better life. So I think for me, thinking about the end of this film, like I will sacrifice as much as I need to have a better life, right? Where that balance lies, I think I'll just have to sort of go too far sometimes, or not far enough. But it's sort of like, where is that balance? And I think that's hopefully what he's sort of getting the audience to ask. Because I think with good filmmaking, that's what, or at least not even good filmmaking, but excuse me, good storytelling. It's not, and that's what you should have done, or that's what the character needs to do at the end, or like it gives a very it asks a question. It doesn't give a statement. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think that's what this film does, and that's why I really enjoy the ending. What do you think?
Yeah, it made me ask that question, and I found that as with Andrew, it's about the product, it's about the drum, it's about the film, it's not about the life that he's going to leave. It's not going to be about leading a happy life. It's about what can he do, what can he chip away at his life to make a better product.
So I think it's relevant. I have a question for you. We'll end on this question. I don't know if I'll be able to answer it or not. Would you be willing to live a miserable life, no friends, no family, just an overall pretty shitty existence, and have the best filmography, like something that rivals something like Stanley Kubrick's, but live a quite honestly just a shitty existence, or have a pretty strong filmography, like nothing that people can like laugh at, and have a happy family, a happy life, you live long enough to see your grandchildren graduate, that sort of thing. That's
a great question.
What would you do?
Absolutely. I'm willing to suffer.
You're willing to suffer? That's interesting. My gut says that I would not. And I don't want that to sound like I'm not willing to put in the work or anything. But I don't really care what happens to my shit when I die. Like I don't. Mm-hmm. Like once I'm dead, and maybe in that way I'm more selfish than you. Like I do my films, my art, and all sort of stuff for the personal enjoyment I get out of it, and for hopefully the other people. Like in this, because you're lying to yourself if you're not like doing something nice for someone else. You get a certain enjoyment out of it, right? So I don't care if people think I'm the best filmmaker in the world 100 years from now. I'd much rather have sort of a happy existence because...
then what was the point of you, Paul? Why were you here?
Why am I here? See, I don't know. And also, we're getting into a very philosophical talk. But like, I bring it very quickly back to film. Like, I think that's that's what good film should do, right? And I do, like, I guess my whole thing is I'm trying to figure out, like, how can I achieve what I want to? Because I do want to be a good filmmaker, and I do want to make films as good as this. But I don't want to make others suffer for it, or make myself suffer more than I'm willing, not more than I think I should, but more than I think anyone should. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thing. Hopefully, I'd like to hear some of the listeners' thoughts on that. Like,
are you a martyr for art?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for making it so succinct. Well done, Damien Chazelle. You have made us think and ponder quite a bit. Thank you for listening to. I'm very sure it's a very long podcast. I don't even know how long this is. It's about 70 minutes, so that's not too bad. But again, guys, thank you for listening. My name is Paul Weston.
I'm Noah Cohen.
Thanks again for listening. Bye-bye.